Electricity is an essential part of our daily living, and electricity can also be very expensive. It seems like a very complicated market as well, with a lot of regulations. Joining me now from Calgary to discuss this is Evan Bahry, Executive Director of the Independent Power Producers Society of Alberta. Evan, welcome to Bridge City News.
Great, thank you for having me, Hal.
Now, Evan, first of all, can you explain to our viewers what IPPSA is all about and the role that you play in the provincial electricity market?
Yes, we're the trade association of Alberta's power producers. So most of the province's power supply are members of IPSA. Our members compete to serve Alberta's power consumers in the open electricity market and own and operate coal plants, gas plants, wind farms, hydro, some solar, you name it.
Now, the former NDP government was moving toward a capacity market. Can you explain what this is and how it actually works?
Sure. It may be useful for me to begin with describing the market we have today and then explaining the capacity market afterwards. The market we have today is similar to most commodity markets in that price is what signals generation to get built. And in that price, we recover all of the fixed cost of a power plant and the cost to produce each megawatt hour being the variable cost. And the price provides for all of that. It signals the need for new supply, and it compensates again for the production of the product, much like oil or grains, livestock, cattle, you name it. Any kind of open market operates the same way. A capacity market intends to split the two revenue streams, the fixed cost in one market, and then when the plant is constructed and operating, the market for the energy that those plants produce. So it's intended to achieve, again, downward pressure on price through competition and the same attraction of new supply, but through two different mechanisms, if that helps explain it.
So if I understand it correctly, a capacity market would supply more electricity. Would it be at a higher cost to consumers, though?
Well, it would provide the same amount of electricity, just it signals the need for it a number of years in advance. So a capacity market would happen in 1 year for a delivery period 3 years later. And that gap of time allows any new plants that are required to be built to meet that demand to actually get constructed. So the fixed costs are established through one market, the capacity market, in 1 year for production of power 3 years in advance. And then when the power is needed in that delivery year, the energy market compensates for the production of that power. So it doesn't really intend to create new costs for consumers, but rather allows for more predictable development of supply in the future. It does have some different dynamics than the current market, but that's generally the intent of the design, is to attract supply in a predictable manner in the future.
Yeah, we want to see more electricity suppliers enter the Alberta market, which would hopefully increase competition and supply and potentially lower our electric bills. Other jurisdictions have tried the capacity market. Has it led to more businesses investing in electricity generation?
Well, first of all, I'd point out that the market in Alberta has some 40 competitive suppliers already. We've been operating the spot market here for some 23 years. We've seen the downward pressure on price through competition, the provision of new services, and the provision of choice to consumers through retail contracts and so on and so forth. So yes, it does. The capacity market does exist in other jurisdictions. Any market, of course, attracts new investors if the price is sufficient enough for them to determine that they can make a go of it in the market. We've seen those new investors come to Alberta and offer competition and choice already. This is just a different approach to achieving the same goal of reliable supply with the downward pressure of competition on market prices.
So Premier Jason Kenney will soon be making a decision to keep or drop the proposed capacity market. What are the other options? Could we return to the regulated market we had before 2000?
Well, I would guess pose the question or pose a response this way is the open market has attracted supply. It's enabled us to build sufficient supply to meet the fastest growing demand for power in North America over the last 15 more years, and has produced downward pressure on price. So if we have a market that's successful, And we have the shift of investor risk onto producers. It's producers who compete to serve consumers. When you migrate to other constructs like the regulated regime, then the central planner is making decisions on behalf of consumers for the life of an asset. In other words, what if the central planner decides to enter into contracts or re-regulate the marketplace and picks a technology that, again, obligates consumers to pay for that technology for the life of the asset. That doesn't allow for efficiency over time. It doesn't encourage the latest and greatest technology to come, as we've seen in Alberta, in the open market. So I would question if we have a market that's successful, that's seeing price that's below the cost of new supply, that means there's value to consumers already. Re-regulating the market introduces new costs and new risks to consumers.
So, Evan, what needs to be in place to ensure a profit can be made by businesses who would be investing huge amounts of money to build new electricity plants?
Well, we're looking for, and any market needs this, it needs a level playing field, it needs appropriate rules in place to ensure that the market and investors have the confidence that they can compete and have a chance to recover their costs over 20 years, that the rules won't change too much after they've made those investments. And just as I mentioned earlier, our members have invested some $20 billion in new supply to meet, again, Alberta's growing economy, have done so. And we'll look to the government to create a stable enough regime that allows them to compete to recover those costs over the life of the asset. That gives investors confidence to keep investing, which many of our members have done so.
Premier Jason Kenney's also talked about cutting a lot of the red tape to help business owners flourish. Do we still have a problem with red tape and environmental hoops that businesses have to jump through?
Well, we think there are quite a significant degree of agencies that have a role in a marketplace. Our industry has some 6 different agencies involved in various parts of the business. We see cross-threading. We see a number of them appearing in hearings where one agency takes a second agency before the third agency. So we definitely have some concerns about cross-threading, overlap, duplication of mandates, and we would definitely see there's room for improvement in aligning the agencies that oversee this market and reducing it. Of course, all those costs and all those bureaucracies end up being paid for by consumers on their bill. Again, we think there could be a lot of work done to reduce that impact on consumers' bills.
Now, can you comment on the close to $2 billion in losses the Alberta Balancing Pool has incurred with its controversial power purchase deals?
Yeah, we've had a lot of concerns about their behavior in the marketplace. We filed a complaint about their behavior, seeking to have it corrected. In our mind, that behavior has precipitated an impact on Alberta's power market for the detriment to consumers to the tune of $1.8 billion, and has also impacted the prices that our members receive in the electricity market. We support the government's suggestion of a special audit by the Auditor General to look into this behavior of the balancing pool, how it transpired, why it continued for so long, and why the checks and balances in place from the balancing pool, as well as the Market Surveillance Administrator, who we filed a complaint to, didn't address those issues. So that's definitely a matter that's been a concern of ours, and we are encouraged by this suggestion of an audit by the Auditor General to look into it.
What about the target of eliminating coal-fired electricity? Is it really helpful now that so many plants are using natural gas?
Well, that's a very good point. We've actually had more natural gas-fired generation than we've had coal generation since 2014 in terms of supply that's available to our grid. Coal operates 24/7, so we get a lot of our power from coal. We're also seeing gas replacing coal in terms of the announced projects to date and the significant investment of cogeneration. So the market naturally has migrated towards natural gas-fired generation because natural gas prices are so soft. Again, in any market, the producer looks to find efficiencies, migrate to the least cost production, flow that cost and that efficiency through to market prices. So yes, we have seen a migration to to natural gas generation. Alberta, as you may appreciate, does not have the topography for large-scale hydro like BC or Manitoba or Quebec does. So we are bound in the foreseeable future to be producing electricity from coal and natural gas. But our members are migrating towards natural gas generation, in part because of carbon policy, but also because just the natural attractiveness of softening natural gas prices.
How about some of the more green energy alternatives? What about wind and solar generated electricity production? Are we going to see more of this? And if so, is it even profitable? And the reason I bring that up, a $13 million solar power plant recently shut down in Medicine Hat because apparently it wasn't cost effective enough.
Well, sure, and a market that's very competitive does that for us. That can't compete. So there's a profoundly strong regime in Alberta for wind and for solar. So we're seeing a lot of wind come on. In fact, we've had for a significant period of time one of the largest percentages of wind as a percentage of the total installed capacity in Alberta for some time because it's an attractive resource. Solar also is attractive due to the daylight hours in the province, but those also do, and those technologies have to compete against low-cost gas. And I think that was the issue with Medicine Hat. They couldn't justify those costs against all the alternatives. But consumers in Alberta have pulled, have through their interest sought green power through green power contracts. Large industrials have built wind farms to offset their CO2 liabilities. And we're seeing a growing interest in rooftop solar for similar means, consumers again exercising choice to purchase those green powers. And that's one way that, again, we're seeing these supplies being added through the power of the market and the choices consumers are exercising in how they want their power. And as that consumer interest continues, then the market will meet that demand.
So what would your recommendations be to the provincial government as to which direction to take our electricity market?
Well, we're looking forward to this review that the UCP has announced in their platform. It's a 90-day review. We're waiting to see how that will be structured. IPSA will participate in that, as will our members, as will Alberta's power consumers and power consumer associations. So again, I think we should be hearing something about how that will be structured in the coming days and weeks. And based on that design, we will engage in that. And so stay tuned, as we all will be, to wait and see how that unfolds.
Stay tuned, absolutely. Evan, can you also help our viewers understand our electricity bills? We get billed for, how many kilowatt hours of power we use, add up all of the other things as well on our bills like the rate rider, transmission surcharge, municipal franchise fee. Can you break that down for us?
Well, sure. And the bill has two general components. One is what we call a variable charge, which means how much power you consume. That, of course, determines how much energy you consume, and there's a cost on your bill for that. And then the remaining charges on your bill are generally a fixed charge, meaning the cost of wires to get the power to your home. On top of that, there's some taxes, but the access fee is what the local municipality charges you for the right of the wires owners to be on their land. So that's not necessarily associated with the direct production and delivery of power. That's what municipalities are charging on top of that. But the bill, while complicated, was designed to be transparent. And there are a number of items so that consumers can not just see one number and look at it as a black box, but you can see, for example, on the energy charge, how that's relating to wholesale prices, which is kind of our world, and look to that market to see how it's performing. And then you can also examine the bill and see that fundamentally for most consumers, the cost of delivery is larger than the cost of energy. So that indicates to us that the energy market, which we see as being very competitive, is delivering that product to consumers. And I also add that from my own personal experience, when I look at my power bill every month, and I compare that to my other bills, my cable bill, my telephone bill, how much money my car requires when I fill the tank 2-3 times a month, power costs seem reasonable to me, given that power is what is required to make these other services function. As I say, we have a $300 billion economy. none of which functions without electricity or the wires to carry it. So that puts some context to what we pay and why we pay for the power, and again, the wires costs associated with that power.
But you have a whole bunch of teenagers downstairs playing Xbox for hours on end. Serious
Well,
hardcore gamers. That'll increase your bill a little bit too.
and that's a little bit beyond my hand. That's what I would call, again, demand-driven cost of electricity. The more you consume, the more the energy charge will increase. So that's a matter for you and your teenagers, I guess. Nothing I can help you with there on that one.
Evan Bahry, Executive Director of the Independent Power Producers Society of Alberta. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Calgary.
Thank you, Hal, for the opportunity.